Hello and welcome to 2022 and our first episode of the new year. Tosh, how are you?
I am here. I'm in it to win it, friend. How are you?
Pretty much that's the same thing I keep saying to everyone. If I am speaking to you, then it's a good day and I am here. We are here on Zoom again because there's, all kinds of craziness happening again. And we're going to kind of continue to ignore that because I think people are tired of hearing all about it.
Yep.
And we're going to just talk about something fun instead today, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we both, I assume, had wonderful holiday breaks and maybe got a couple of books for Christmas, found them under the Christmas tree potentially.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I should have counted how many I got this year.
Really?
2, 3, 4. I would say it was an average year for me in terms of books. I'm going to say there was maybe half a dozen books.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is this all from your husband, Alex, and the kids, or like your parents buying you books, family, friends?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
it's a mix.
So it's not just all like going out and going on a, crazy shopping spree at Chapters.
There's some of that too. If we count in the books that I bought myself in the past month and a half under the guise of Christmas, then the number is probably much higher. Yeah, we're getting closer to 2 dozen probably if we go with
wow. Wow. Now, I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but do you keep your books or do you lend them out? You can
tell looking at my face.
Yeah.
For people who are listening, that's an obvious. Jenna keeps her books.
Yeah.
And if you get a load of my book, then you are a very special person. And if you don't give it back, I will hold a grudge for decades. Just put it out there. I can tell you names.
Yeah. I'm the exact same way. My mom was here in November and she asked if she could take back my most recent Jennifer Weirner book. And I was like, yes,
you are my mother.
Yeah. How do I say no to that? And then we went to Ontario for Christmas and she was like, you should take this book home. I wish I had it down here with me, but I'm a big Royals fan and I come by it. Honestly, I come by it through my mom. And there's an author that she loves that writes loosely based on the royal family. And so there was one called The Queen and she sent me home with that. She's like, here's a good place to start. And she's like, but I'm going to need that back the next time I see you. So get reading. At least
you guys understand each other then.
Yeah.
That's a pretty fair relationship. I would say my dad and I are kind of like that. My dad and I will trade books back and forth sometimes. And there's usually, they're starting to downsize a bit more. So there's less of a, we need this back or, read this while you're here.
Yeah. You can't go back home until you've read this. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And I have to say, I've gotten better over the years with giving away some of my books. And I've been looking at the bookcase going, I really can probably give up a few more of these now, but I find it really hard to part with books that I've enjoyed because I will, like, some of them I do definitely go back and read again. Some of them, maybe, Alex hasn't read yet, or eventually I think the kids should read them. Although I say that and I'm like, yeah, that stack of Babysitter's Club on the shelf, Claire is not reading.
We'll take them.
Maybe
Maybe
I should. Well, she prefers the new versions of them, right? So
the graphic novels.
Yes.
Sarah too, and it's killing me. I'm like, honey, the books are really good. And she has become obsessed. Sarah, I bet you the same as you, has probably pulled 2 dozen books over the Christmas holidays. That's what she spent all of her money on. I bought a box of books, I filled a box with books I bought off a marketplace for Christmas. There was, I think, 12 books in the box. And there's like Dork Diaries and a couple of Dog Man, some Babysitter Club ones too. And that was her favorite gift. That's what she talked about more than anything else. But yeah, she said the same thing. She's like, well, I've already got all 9 of the Babysitters Club books. And I was like, there's more than 9, sweetheart. But yeah, she meant the graphic novels.
1 through 35 on my shelf, plus the super specials.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. And then there's like Babysitter's Club Little Sister edition too.
Yeah, I never got into those. I was older by the time those came out. So
yeah, I'm not sure,
but those are also out in graphic novel version as well. So Yeah. Although at least now we're getting to the stage with Clara. So she's in grade 5. Some of the graphic novels that she's picking up, I'm interested in reading. One of the ones she got for Christmas is called Borders, and it's an adaptation of a Thomas King story. And it's about a family who are Crowfoot and have to go back and forth between the Canadian and US border. And when they're asked, where are you from? What's your, show us your passport or whatever. And the mother's like, well, we're Crowfoot. We, this is all where we belong. We don't really necessarily have the same border and the same mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all around that. And so I know she read it already, and I'm kind of like, okay, so when you're done with the book, give it to me. And so it's kind of nice to be slowly sliding into that territory where, we can kind of share some of the graphic novels, which is interesting.
That is interesting. It's funny. So while I was home, my sister is a librarian, and she actually, she runs like the Springwater area of Ontario's library. So she's got a few libraries under her belt, and we were talking about the graphic novels and how I don't like that Sarah reads them. Because in my head, I'm like, she's not learning to use her imagination. She's not trying to picture things, right? Because it's right there in front of her. And so we got into this big discussion about how because she used to live down in Florida. She was living in the Keys for many, many years. And she was one of the first librarians to get graphic novels approved in schools down there because of how they help children learn to read. So my nephew, her son, is dyslexic, and that is what got him into reading and learning how to read with his disability. It was because of these graphic novels. And then I was like, geez, maybe I really need to look at these in another point of view, right? Because I wasn't thinking of them as that way. To me, it was like when we read Archie's as a kid, it was a fun excuse to kind of not have to read too much and think too much when you were reading, but now it's obviously very different.
Yeah, it's funny how, as a kid, you don't necessarily make those differences too between the Archie books and the other books, but there's still lots of words, there's lots of learning, there's lots of, and I think part of that joy of reading for a lot of people is not just imagining what you see, when you read a novel and you have to come up with that imagery, but then what you imagine after that. I remember as a kid, one of my cousins especially was fantastic at fan fiction, right? She would go on and create these worlds upon worlds based off of characters that we'd read about in stories we'd read about.
Neat.
And so I think, regardless of how you're reading it, there's still room for that element of imagination that you were worried about. But if you haven't thought that way, it's hard to imagine that someone else is thinking it that way.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. And it's funny. One book that got us starting to want to do this conversation is the latest Outlander is out, and you've already read it, which blows my mind because it's giant. And I also got it for Christmas, but I haven't cracked it yet because I was in another book. But you know what? I read them before the show came out. I read it leading up to, maybe the show was already out, but I hadn't watched it yet. And I preferred when I didn't have an idea, I had my own idea of what they look like in my head. And now when I read the books, I'm like, oh, I know what they look like. So there's, the Stars adaptation of what they look like, which I think is pretty bang on. But I think I liked having my own idea in my head of what they look like before putting a face to the name kind of thing.
It's tricky with things like that, right? I do enjoy how they've cast that show. And so I do kind of like now when I'm reading it that I have those images in my head because I like how vivid they are. And I think they did a good job of casting. But yeah, there's definitely been things where I've watched where I've been like, no, what are you doing? Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm really enjoying about this series now, because I had a moment where I almost kind of fell off the fan track. I will be honest.
Oh my gosh.
So I read the original Outlander book not that long after it had come out, really, when it first started to kind of hit that popularity boom. And we're talking sometime in the early 2000s. Because when I started reading the series, there were 3 books published.
Okay.
And got through the first 3 books. And then it was that waiting.
Yes.
waiting.
She takes forever to put out the next book, but
because this book is 888 pages long.
exactly. It's allowed.
It takes a while to write that.
She's busy.
Especially when you're drawing on historical things. You do have to do a fair level of research that you might not otherwise do if you were doing, writing science fiction or complete fantasy. You need to make sure that what you're putting in there is close enough to the truth that you're not going to, have legions of people coming after you for what you've done.
Because they will.
Well, and to that point, I'll say there's an interesting little bit in the afterword of this book, Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, where she addresses some things that have been highlighted that she did put in earlier books that she's come to understand, although she did her best at the time, are maybe not as accurate as they could have been.
Okay.
And so it was really neat to kind of read her take on that and her explanation as to what she will change about how she's been telling that part of the story. I'm not going to give anything more than that away from it, because I know you haven't read it and other people haven't. And but yeah, it's really fun. When the first couple books, I was really into them because of the Scottish background and the the fantasy and the romanticism of the storyline. And if you've read along the series, I don't think we're not quite to the part in the TV show where I kind of went, what?
Yeah.
Get up.
Yeah. This is just
I'm
too
waiting
far.
for it. I don't know if it's this season of the TV show or if it'll be what would come next. I'm not exactly sure where they're lining up right now because I haven't seen the latest episodes. But there comes a point where I was like, okay, I bought all the time travel until now.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
But I've come back around with this one because now it's very firmly, set in that, Civil War era. Sorry, not the Civil War, but the War of Independence in the United States and again, I think, anyway, sorry, I got interrupted. Now I'm all off. It's set in the time where the US is just about to, defeat the British and take back take on their country for the first time. And I'm finding it really interesting because as I'm reading it, what's standing out now more so than the Scottish history, which I knew some of, now what I'm, connecting with is like, oh yeah, I remember that part in Hamilton.
Oh, really?
It's really fun to kind of have those touch points and see how things are coming. And the story has kind of come back from the part that I didn't quite like where it had gone. But one thing that I want
exactly what you're talking about. So
we can talk about that offline.
I'm sure of it. Yeah.
I don't want spoilers for anyone who's like just getting into the series. One of the things that I think that people who are a fan of the Outlander series, especially those who have read the books or even at this point watch the show, because we're getting to the point in the show where they are in America and it starts to introduce storylines with Quakers and friends, and it's really interesting. And if you haven't read this, you need to.
What do you got there?
So
The Measure of Light?
Called A Measure of Light by Beth Pounding. So Beth Pounding is a New Brunswick author, and she's written a lot of books that I think you will probably love. I got her other book, The Sea Captain's Wife. No, not The Sea Captain's Wife. It's her other book. She's another book about sisters that I'm kind of holding off because I'm torn about reading it for various reasons. But this book, A Measure of Light, is absolutely brilliant, which all her work is. That's not why I'm holding off reading one of them. But A Measure of Light tells that story basically of the families who became known as the Quakers coming from England to America, and a storyline that talks about some of the intricacies that were happening with that religious movement and various religious movements of the time. And so having read A Measure of Light just before Christmas and then getting to read Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, which has a little bit more of that storyline than I think some of the other Outlander books have had, was really fascinating because it's like, oh yeah, it gave that extra context to what was happening. But it's a New Brunswick book, even though it doesn't take place in New Brunswick at all. It's a New Brunswick author. And it's just, same thing. It's that historical fiction that is just so rich with detail and so rich with storytelling that you don't necessarily take it in that you're getting this fantastic history lesson while you're reading the book. And it's a much easier read than the 888 pages. It's what do we got here? It's just over 300.
Okay.
Yeah, much easier read.
Yeah. It's gonna take me till summer to get through Go Tell the Bees, I'm sure. But it sits there on my nightstand and I stare at it every night and go, I should just crack it. Like, forget this book I'm reading and just, but I want to finish the book I'm reading right now first, because it's my first time reading a Nora Roberts book. And yeah, my mom said the exact same thing. She's like, oh, you're like, she's such a good author. And she writes under two names, I guess, apparently too. So anyway.
JD Robb, I believe, is the other name.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's initials. It's J something. I think it's JD.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I know that.
Yeah. This one that I'm reading is called The Villa. And yeah, it's like a little bit steamy. It's got a murder plot in it. Like it's kind of got everything I could possibly want in a story. So I'm definitely going to be finding myself some more of her books as well. And I guess maybe under her studio name too, which would be cool.
Yeah, I feel like I could be wrong on this, and I'm sure someone will correct me. Yeah, but I feel like
I'm gonna Google
the
it while
things
you
that
talk.
she's written under, I want to say it's JD Robb. I feel like are less in the romantic realm.
Okay,
but probably still have a little bit that in it, but are more suspense, detective, mystery kind of stories. Whereas under Nora Roberts, some of her stuff is much more securely in that romance, historical fiction kind of field.
Okay.
And I think it was that I don't know if she wrote under two names because of the time when she started writing, that people wouldn't have, kind of gone between categories as much as they do now, or if it was one of those like, oh, I just want to see how people think of, what people think of this writing if they don't associate it with me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I have read some of her stuff a long time ago. I haven't read any of her stuff recently, and it's always kind of on my like radar of like, oh yeah, I should really pick up some of her stuff again. So I'll be curious to know as you read what ones you think would fit me, because I'm trying to think of the name now. She had a series years ago that was very much set in Scotland, in a Scottish family.
Oh yeah. She apparently writes under four names.
Oh, only 4 names. Okay.
Only. And she's got about
I feel like it's like me with all my different Facebook accounts.
Seriously.
On this page and that page and this page and that page.
Yeah. I know. And then you're responding to yourself through pages. Yeah. Anyway. JD Robb is right. And then there's a Jill March and a Sarah Hardesty.
Oh, I hadn't heard those names. Interesting.
She's apparently got 225 romance novels out. That's just the romance.
Just the romance. And that's mostly under the Nora Roberts name, I think, right?
Yeah. By the looks of it, yeah. So, oh my gosh, unbelievable. That girl, what is she? She clearly has no life. When she's just writing all the time. I don't understand.
It's amazing, I think, how some people have that capacity to just like have so much and not have it seem overly repetitive or dry and whatnot. I'm sorry for those of you watching, I just hit my laptop and it shook everything there. It was not an earthquake. We're fine. I don't know. We just passed the 40th anniversary of the largest earthquake New Brunswick ever had, so I'm having that, like, there's probably people out there who are like,
flashbacks. Yeah,
everything else is happening, it's about time for another one.
Why
of these,
not?
right?
Why not? Yeah.
What I was going to mention about the idea, we were talking about books and, then seeing them on screen and whether it matches or not. One adaptation that I just watched that I haven't read the book, that I'm kind of torn. I'm very curious. Like, I wish somehow you could do the control groups of like experience it both ways and see which way is better.
Yeah.
Because, so have you watched Normal People?
No.
Or read Normal People?
No.
So, oh my goodness, I think you'll love it. So it was airing on CBC and now it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
And it's 12 episodes, like half-hour episodes though. And it was done partially through the BBC. It's set in Ireland. And it's the story of these two characters who meet in high school, and then it follows them through university. And they have this really complicated, interesting relationship. And oh my goodness, It's amazing. I had been told I would love it, and my cousin was right. It is fantastic. It is rated 18 plus, so do not watch
Okay.
it if you're not ready for what's going to happen. But the characters were so interesting, and there was a moment just in the screen adaptation where one of the characters was experiencing anxiety, and it hadn't really been clear up to that point to what extent this character was experiencing this. And then suddenly it was like that, like, oh my goodness, I am suddenly inside the head of a couple people I could think of that I know experienced this. I'm like, I thought I had an idea of what it was like. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I didn't quite get the extent of it. And oh my goodness, this is how exhausting it must be to live this way.
Yeah,
And
seriously.
it was just, I'm like, if it was captured this well on film, I'm desperate now to know what it was like to read it. And I wondered, do you get more of it earlier and it's not such a surprise the way it was for me to watch it on screen? Or
Right.
like it was just fascinating. And so I looked at, so the author, Sally Rooney, only has 3 books because she's 30. And like the praise for her is just like off the charts. And I'm so excited now to be like, oh my goodness. So her 3rd book, so that was her 2nd book, her 3rd book, someone has also bought the rights and is going to adapt it for screen. So I'm like, okay, that one I think I have to read first.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll see. And I do want to go back and read the book Normal People, because I think it sounds really fascinating. And like I said, it just, there were snippets of various things, but one scene, especially with anxiety, I was just like, oh, wow, I have watched a lot of things and read a lot of things, and I've never seen it captured quite that well.
Wow. Okay.
That was my take on it.
Okay. I'm going to look that up for sure. Yeah. Have you heard of the book Washington Black?
No.
Me either. But this just came down the pipe the other day that this book, that again by a young Canadian author, is being turned into a 9-part miniseries thanks to Disney, and they're filming it in Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia, yeah. That part, yes. I'm like, that's the part I heard. That's the part I know.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting.
It was the guy from This Is Us, isn't it?
Maybe.
I think it's the actor from the show This Is Us who's cast to be part of the filming in Nova Scotia. I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. Okay. Was a picture of him with the headline. Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to read beyond the headline on that one.
Yeah, I hadn't read into who's into it yet. It's being filmed, and you might know this being from Nova Scotia, but Shelburne isn't exactly on your end of the island, but still. It's being filmed at a historic place called Cooper's Inn, and it starts in March, and it's supposed to, like, the famous people will be there until about May, but it is a movie, so who knows, probably June, maybe even July. I thought that was pretty neat, and there's
been a lot of fantastic things filmed in Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
like there's been no shortage of folks who've been there for amazing things, and a lot of things too that kind of fly under the radar. Oh my goodness, you're gonna put me on the spot. I'm trying to remember. There was a name of a movie that popped up. I think I streamed it on Netflix. I don't think it was Shelburne. I think that one was filmed in Lunenburg or Mahone Bay.
Okay,
and it was this kind of fantasy small town. It was just kind of a sweet. It's called The Healer.
Okay.
Anyway, it was one of those that, it's worth the watch if you like, if you're the type who watches Hallmark Christmas movies, you will enjoy that.
It'll go along just fine. Yeah.
But it has a little bit more depth than some of those do. But that's even just from a economy point of view, that's so fantastic to hear that something is going to be filming again in Nova Scotia. There was such a busy, growing, movie film industry there for so long, and even before the pandemic, some things kind of went sideways there, and then the pandemic really just took a bite out of everything, of course.
Yeah.
So to hear that something of that magnitude is filming there again is exciting. Speaking of exciting things that Disney has filmed on the East Coast, I'm gonna have to look up when Peter Pan is coming out, because they filmed that last summer in Newfoundland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see Newfoundland as a backdrop for Peter Pan story.
It'll be perfect. It'll be perfect. So magical. And
Mm.
I think it's going to be really good. Also, I'm really excited to see, well, I was going to say a live action Peter Pan, but we have a few of those, I suppose.
Yes, but when it's the Disney version, there
Yeah.
is something special about what that production company can do.
Yes, it's very true, but it won't be Hook. That's my kids' favorite. They love Hook so much.
I loved that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I went to the theater to see that.
Did you?
I remember going with my dad and my little brother, and just, it was fantastic. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I saw that at Triple Cinemas in Sydney.
Woohoo!
Which anyone from Cape Breton's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Memory lane right there.
Yeah.
Going to the
It's the
Triple
spot.
Cinemas. Yeah. Whole
That's
3
awesome.
screens, baby. That was
Wow.
something else.
That is
Yeah.
something else. Very cool.
It was very big time if you're going. Yeah. Let's go to the movies. It was not as lovely a setting, I have to say, as the Vogue Theater, which was on Charlotte Street, which was another place that I was lucky enough. I'm of an age where I actually got to see movies at the Vogue Theater.
That's like people here in Riverview when they went to the Toonie Theater. Yeah.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
You hear stories of that too. Yeah.
Yeah. The Vogue was more, it was very Art Deco kind of, not quite like watching a movie at the Capitol, but similar to the Capitol Theater. But yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, I remember going to watch Hook there.
Yeah. We are showing our age, aren't we? So we probably should.
Which I've never had a problem with.
Yeah,
no problem.
No, definitely not.
People know that. Yes, and these days, some days, it's getting more and more apparent. I will share my husband and a couple of his friends. Before things kind of shifted here, we're going out, once a week regularly to catch up, and came to the realization one night that we used to talk about the man and what was how he was ruining everything, and now they're like, oh, we're the man.
Now that it's happened. It's happened. Yeah. That twist.
That
yeah. I enjoy it. I like aging. So
there's parts of it that I'm okay with, and parts of it where it's just like, oh, I kind of miss being surprised and excited and like discovering things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it gets a little tiresome feeling like you're the one who has knowledge to pass on. Right, not in a bad way, and not in a like, oh my god, can't you understand this way? Just like, wow, I never thought of that aspect of it for people who were older than me, of the like, there's mentorship, and then there's just like, how many times must we repeat everything that's ever happened in the world so that we can all learn it again?
A lot, apparently.
And I'm in the middle there, right? It's not that I've experienced everything, obviously.
I understand. I understand.
There's been a shift for sure.
To say the least. All we can do is hopefully raise our children to be ones that remembered some stuff. We'll see.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Or just, continuously point out how far removed we are from their generation. My daughter's gotten very interested in knowing the exact, what age groups fall into what generation and what this generation thinks of that generation. I'm like, that the numbers really, there are not hard lines, and it's not that easy. And that whole concept of what we used to think of in terms of a generation is not, like, we have to make the generation so much shorter now because it's really about what you experience, not your age. And anyway.
Yeah, that's cute though. I like that she's finding an interest in those things, for sure.
Oh yes. Yeah, very much. Yeah. But now she's 10, right? So I can keep pointing out, well, your little cousins are about to come up and tell you what you don't know.
Now that you're getting old.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's fun to watch.
That's cute. I like that. And her little brothers are going to start that on her soon too, I'm sure. If not already.
I think, they're kind of the same generation though. There's not enough age gap between them. That's more just the sibling rivalry.
Yep. Boy, oh boy, there's a lot of that. Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably wrap up the show. I'm not sure when we started recording, but it's got to be roughly around now.
Oh, yes. So we hope that everyone enjoyed this little journey through our, bedside reading tables today. And we will probably be back to somewhat regular scheduling next week with some guests lined up. I know we do have definitely some guests lined up for this season over Zoom. And if anyone listening, watching has any ideas, people you think that we should be chatting with, please let us know. We are always open to your ideas and suggestions.
Absolutely. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching and listening.